I shot a feature film with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Here are the pros and cons. In the spring of 2023, I shot my first narrative feature film. This video I dedicate to the extraordinary camera with which I shot this film. A camera that already in its young years has earned the status of a cult classic. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I love this camera, but nevertheless I have now said goodbye to it and bought a new camera. Why? I tell you in this video. Get out of here. For my feature film, the black and white game, I used the BMP-CC 4K either on a tripod or as a handheld camera on a shoulder rig. There were a couple of scenes where a gimbal would have been the best option, which I tried, but unfortunately it was inconvenient because the camera has no autofocus and I kept losing focus. That's why I decided to do these scenes with the shoulder rig as well and stabilize them in post-production, which is no problem since I shot the film in 4K and since it will be played out in 1080p anyway. So you can zoom in up to 200% without full HD quality loss. I love the look this camera creates. The dynamic range is fantastic and very cinematic. For my movie I used the Sigma 30mm F1.4 DC DN lens, which is a great combination. It is sharp but also very soft and dreamy, which suits my style. Since most of the film is black and white due to the story,
black or white, it's always the same pattern.
I didn't have to stay at the open aperture of 1.4 all the time. Because it's not so noticeable in black and white that the aperture was changed compared to color, where you should liberally stay at one aperture and change the exposure with the variable ND filter and get the same look. Filters were always two pieces on the lens. Once a variable ND filter and additionally a Tiffen Black Pro Mist filter in the strength 1/2 to keep everything very soft and dreamy, which the story of my film visually requires. The camera's menu is a dream. This simplicity is not only great for minimalists, but provides quick access for changes during a shoot. As for the battery, well, for larger productions you should install a V-mount battery anyway. I actually shot the whole film without a V-mount battery, but with the BMP-CC 4K batteries. However, I never shot more than 4 hours. With a regular shooting day of 10 or 15 hours, this is of course not possible. For storage, I used an external hard drive, the Samsung SSD T7 1TB, which is fantastic. When the camera was mounted on the shoulder rig, I only used the Blackmagic monitor on the camera, which is superior. This camera has the best exposure tool ever, false colors. You always have this in front of you when you need it. I put it on a custom button, as well as a LUT to check, and focus peaking to check focus. When the camera was on the tripod, I used a monitor from Freeworld, which also has a false color function. But it's not as good as the cameras, so I didn't want to rely on it and always bent over to check it on the camera. So now we come to the big disadvantage of this camera, which, however, is not a disadvantage for many, since it always depends on the wishes and concerns of the filmmaker. autofocus. Since I do most of my projects alone and like to use a gimbal, it is extremely difficult with this camera. For my music video shoots, I often use the camera on the gimbal, but only with the Laowa 7.5mm lens, where everything in the frame is sharp. Other lenses, like my Helios vintage lens, are not possible to make on the gimbal, because it would be constantly out of focus. The form factor is also not ideal for a gimbal, as the camera is relatively wide and does not really deserve the title Pocket, compared to other cameras with similar video functions. I'm now in pre-production for my second feature film, which I will shoot this winter in the Ural Mountains in Russia. Again, with a very limited crew, I decided to sell my Pocket 4K and buy a new camera, which will suit my style of filmmaking as well and has autofocus. Since I'm also a photographer, I could also sell my Canon M50, because the new camera is an excellent hybrid camera. The new camera is the Fujifilm XT3. Now I have a camera with also exceptional video features, a great f-log profile, and a dynamic range that is not worse than the Pocket 4K, and additionally has autofocus and a form factor that I can finally use the camera with different lenses on the gimbal. It will also reduce my workflow for photo shootings, as the Fujifilm JPEGs recipes are just great and I won't have to do as much post-processing. But that's another topic. There are minuses with the new camera too. It doesn't have the great false colors tool, but the Zebra tool, which is good too, but not as good as the false color in the Blackmagic. The menu and the playback is also not as good. In conclusion, I can say, thank you, dear Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I love you. As my tool, you made my dream come true, and I shot my first feature film with you. It has been an honor. Farewell and goodbye. Anyone who wants to get the camera and shoot a feature film in the future and does not need autofocus is doing everything right. If you want to see the trailer of my feature film, please click here. And if you want to see how I made my feature film, click here. Thanks and see you soon.